Namaste everyone, welcome. This video is based on a paper by Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, EAC-PM. The topic is why India performs poorly on Global Perception Indices. It is a case study based on 3 opinion-based indices: Freedom in the World Index, EIU Democracy Index, and Variety of Democracy Indices, VDEM. It is by the Economic Advisory Council to the PM and it came out in November 2022. It is authored by Sanjeev Sanyal and Akanksha Arora. It is a case study of 3 opinion-based indices. Freedom in the World Index. It is conducted by an US-based non-governmental organization called Freedom House. EIU Democracy Index. It is conducted by Economist Intelligence Unit, the research division of the Economist Group, a UK-based private company. The third one being Variety of Democracy Indices. It is conducted by University of Gothenburg in Sweden. Why this paper? One way to respond to this is to ignore these reports saying that they are mere opinions. However, the issue is that they have concrete implications. For instance, these indices are inputs into the world's World Governance Indicators (WGI) that in turn have approximately 18 to 20% weightage in the sovereign ratings of the country. We'll go through the first survey, that is the Freedom in the World Index. It is being conducted by the Freedom House since 1973. India's score on civil liberties was flat at 42 till 2018, but dropped sharply to 33 by 2022. Political rights dropped from 35 to 33. Thus, India's total score dropped to 66, which places India in the partially free category. It is the same status it had during the emergency period. If you compare it to other democracies or other countries, the Freedom in the World report has given the territory of Northern Cyprus a score of 77, which makes it a free democracy. FYI, this is a territory only recognized by Turkey and not even by the UN. Jammu Kashmir, J&K, is being treated as a separate territory since the early 1990s, and now it places it in the category of not free. Going to the second survey, the Economist Intelligence Unit, EIU Democracy Index. It places India in the category of flawed democracy. Indian rank was 27 in 2014 and it dropped to 53 in 2020, and then it improved a bit to 46 in 2021. Decline in scores has been primarily in the categories of civil liberties and political culture. The maximum decline has been in the category of civil liberties. The score declined from 9.41 in 2014 to 5.59 in 2020. The score in political culture has declined from 6.25 to 5.0 in the same period. The marginal recovery of rank to 46 in 2021 is primarily on the grounds that the government rolled back the farm sector reforms, which led to the improvement in scores on the categories of civil liberties, functioning of government, and political participation. If we compare the EIU scores with other countries, India's latest scores of civil liberties lags behind that of Hong Kong, which is at 8.53. India's score for political culture is much lower than that of Hong Kong, which is at 7.5, and Sri Lanka, which is at 6.25. The methodology employed by the EIU survey. In their report, the EIU mentions that they do not only rely on the opinions of experts, but also take responses for some questions from opinion polls, if available, primarily from the World Value Survey, WVS. If the response from opinion polls are not available, then the response for those questions also are answered by experts. If we consider this, then the opinions of experts plus opinion polls are considered for their methodology. In case of India, the latest available WVS report is of 2012. The latest round of Wave 7, that is 2017 to 2020, has not been conducted for India yet. This implies that score of EIU Democracy Index for India is based solely on expert opinion since 2012. Coming to the third index, the VDEM, Variety of Democracies Indices. It is based on 6 indices covering various aspects of democracy, like liberal democracy, electoral democracy, liberal component, egalitarian component, participatory component, deliberative component. These indices are also comprised of sub-indices. Some of the variables that feed into these indices are objective, that is, which are based on factual data such as election type, minimum voting age, percentage of population with suffrage, occurrence of referendum, presidential election vote share of the largest vote getter, etc. Whereas some other variables are very subjective, that is, evaluative indicators based on ratings provided by experts. The final indices are created by combining both kind of variables. If you analyze the VDEM scores, it shows that India does well on objective parameters such as share of population with suffrage, but scores very low on subjective sub-indices, and it has declined very sharply since 2014. In fact, India has been termed as electoral autocracy in the 2021 report, same as it was during the period of emergency. The Liberal Democracy Index has declined from 0.567 in 2013 to a 0.357 in 2021. Secondly, the Electoral Democracy Index has declined from 0.695 to 0.444 during the same period. Now, if we compare it with other countries, India's rank on Liberal Democracy Index is 93. If you compare it to Kingdom of Lesotho, it has a rank of 60. Kosovo, which declared independence from Serbia only in 2008, has a rank of 79, which is higher than that of India. A common thread in all these indices is that they are derived from perception or opinions of few experts. These institutions do not provide any transparency on how the experts were chosen or even their expertise or nationality, except in case of VDEM, where they clarify that they chose some experts from each country from different fields. If you see the Freedom House report, it mentions that report is produced by a team of in-house staff / analysts / consultants and external analysts and expert advisors from the academic, think tank, and human rights communities. The nationality and expertise of these experts are not made clear in the report. Another thing you will find common in these reports is that these reports and these indices are all based on set of questions. And now these questions are highly subjective in nature.
Hence, simply providing the same questions for all countries does not mean getting comparable scores on different countries, as generic questions can be answered very differently by different experts based on different countries. If you consider the question, how pervasive is corruption, the way this question is framed
can have different answers from different experts and lead to different impacts on the scores. Now the question, is the head of the state democratically elected, is not asked in these surveys. Now if this question was to be asked, it would negatively affect countries such as Sweden, Norway, UK, etc., as these countries have constitutional monarchies. Now we can say that asking such question is not unreasonable, as the index is trying to assess the democratic situation in any country. Some of the questions that are asked here does not meaningfully indicate the situation of democracy. There is a sub-index called direct popular vote in VDEM based on the following question: to what extent is the direct popular vote utilized? In this indicator, India's score is 0. This sub-index is more suitable for smaller democracies like Switzerland, where direct referendums are feasible. Now, when it comes to countries like US and India, where such plebiscites and referendums are not feasible, the scores tend to be closer to 0. Now, countries such as Afghanistan, Belarus, and Cuba score higher than 0 in this sub-index. There was a lot of changes in scores during the COVID period. The think tanks justify the changes in scores in the reports based on selective use of some reports from media. For instance, EIU in its report mentions that authorities' handling of COVID pandemic has also led to further erosion of civil liberties in 2020. There is no basis to show how anything different was done in India beyond what was necessary to contain the pandemic. Most countries had imposed COVID restrictions during this time. If you see the Freedom House Index, it declares that informal community council issued edicts concerning social customs that discriminate against women and minority groups. However, it does not explain how this has worsened over time. In conclusion, it can be said that perception-based indices cannot be ignored, as they find their way into concrete things such as sovereign ratings. And more importantly, as environmental, social and governance indices are introduced into global businesses and investment decisions, this could negatively affect investment into the country. The paper suggests Indian government to request the World Bank to demand transparency and accountability from think tanks that provides the inputs for the WGI. The paper suggests The only longer solution is to encourage Indian think tanks to come up with their own indices so that comparative indices are available. It's the second part. The research paper focuses on three indices, out of which this will be on Freedom in the World Index by Freedom House. It will focus on their methodology, India's performance on this index across time, and comparison of India's rank with other countries. Freedom in the World Index by Freedom House. This is their logo. Freedom House is a non-profit, majority US government funded organization based out of Washington DC. It conducts research and advocacy on democracy, political freedom, and human rights. It was founded in October 1941. Freedom in the World is an annual global report on political rights and civil liberties. It is composed of numerical ratings and descriptive text for each country and a select group of territories. Freedom in the World report is being published since 1973 by Freedom House. The 2022 report currently covers 195 countries and 15 territories. Now let us look at their methodology. The Freedom in the World report is produced by a team of in-house staff/analysts/consultants and external analysts and expert advisors from the academic, think tank, and human rights communities. The 2022 edition of the report involved 128 analysts and 50 advisors. The analysts use news articles, academic analysis, reports from NGOs, individual professional contacts, and on-the-ground research to score countries and territories. The scores proposed by the analyst are discussed at a series of review meetings organized by region and attended by Freedom House staff and a panel of advisor and regional experts. There are two key areas within which there are 7 topics on which the report assesses the countries, which are as follows. The first key area is political rights. Under this, there are 3 topics. The first one being electoral process, consisting of executive and legislative elections and the entire electoral framework, which make up 3 questions in the questionnaire. The second one being political pluralism and participation. It deals with party system, competition, freedom to exercise political choices, and minority voting rights. 4 questions are asked on this. The third one being functioning of government, like corruption, transparency, and ability of elected officials to govern in practice. 3 questions are asked on this. The second key area is civil liberties. Under this, there are 4 topics. First one being freedom of expression and belief. Media, religious freedom, academic freedom, and free private discussions are a part of this, and 4 questions are asked on this. The second one is associational and organizational rights, like free assembly, civic groups, and labor unions. 3 questions are asked on this. Third one being rule of law, like independent judges and prosecutors, due process, crime and disorder, and legal equality. 4 questions are asked on this. Personal autonomy and individual rights is the 4th topic under this. It includes freedom of movement, property rights, personal and family rights, and freedom from economic exploitation. 4 questions are asked on this. The overall scoring is based on a set of 25 questions, which are answered by staff, analysts, consultants, and experts. On each question, the expert gives score ranging from 0 to 4. A score of 0 represents the smallest degree of freedom and 4 the greatest degree of freedom. So maximum score on political rights is 40, that is 4 marks into 10 questions, and 60 for civil liberties, that is 4 mark into 15 questions. Overall, a country can get a maximum of 100 marks. Based on the scores on both parameters, the countries are then classified into free, F, partly free, PF, and not free, NF categories. In this table, you can see, based on different scores, how different countries would be categorized according to their scores. I have taken the table directly from the Sanjeev Sanyal report. In the pic, you can see that they have given the source as Freedom in the World methodology. Now we'll see how India performed in this report. India's score on Freedom in the World Index has consistently declined post-2018. Overall, India's score on index stands at 66 in 2022, which is down from 77 in 2018. The decline has been on account of the category civil liberties, which declined from 42 in 2018 to 33 in 2022. The score on political rights also declined slightly from 35 in 2018 to 33 in 2022. This makes India partially free. If you see the 2021 report, India was on free status. According to me, the biggest concern is this point, which makes me question the intention of this report, because this report considers Jammu and Kashmir (JNK) as a separate territory from India and gives it separate ranking since 1990. In the latest report, territory of J&K is considered as not free. In this graph, you can see India's score on civil liberties and political rights all the way from 2006. You can also see the dip from 2018. Once again, I have taken the table directly from the report. The previous two times when India was downgraded to partially free status was once during 1975-76, it was the emergency period, and 1991-96 during the years of economic liberalization. What does the period of emergency and today have in common? The year of emergency was a period of obvious political repression, suspended elections, official censoring of the press, jailing of opponents without charge, banned labor strikes, etc. And how does emergency period compare with the period of economic liberalization and to today? This chart has all the questions on which India's score declined from 2018, leading to overall decline in the score. If you want to see the complete list of questions that are asked in this survey, you can check it out in the report. The link is in the description. Now here, out of 25 questions in the questionnaire, scores decreased on 10 questions, out of which 8 were in the category of civil liberties, like are there free and independent media? In 2018, the score was 3, and in 2022, the score dropped to 2. Like another question, is there an independent judiciary? The score in 2018 was 3, which dropped to 2 in 2022. You can check out the rest of the question in the table. And during this period, India's score did not increase on any question. The authors of this report analyzed the Freedom House annual reports and found out that the Freedom House report uses media reports that cherry picks some issues to make their judgments. One example authors of this report point out is that Muslim candidates notably won 27 out of 545 seats in 2019 Lok Sabha election, up from 22 previously. However, this amounted to just 5% of the seats in the chamber, whereas Muslims make up of 14% of the Indian population. The authors say that even though the number of seats have increased over the years, it is not clear how the situation has worsened over time. Another example this report takes from the Freedom House report is this: journalists risk harassment, death threat and physical violence in the course of their work. Freedom House cites figures from the Committee to Protect Journalists (CPJ) claiming that 5 journalists were killed in India in 2021, which is the highest figure for any country, which amounts to 11% of the world's total. If you see just this, it makes it seem like the situation in India is the worst, and journalists here are not safe at all. However, the Freedom House report ignores that. From the same CPJ's data, India's 5 journalist deaths represented 11% of the world total, and in comparison, India constitutes 22% of the world's population outside of China, whose journalist deaths are not included in CPJ's data. Now we'll compare India's rank and score with other countries. Now keep in mind, in the latest report of 2022, India's score of the Freedom in the World Index is 66, and it is in the category of partially free. When we compare India's score with other countries, the arbitrary nature in the way of scoring the Freedom House report becomes very clear. Like Northern Cyprus is considered as a free category with a score of 77 in the 2022 report. FYI, North Cyprus is not even recognized by UN as a country. It is recognized only by Turkey. It is a Turkish-controlled area, also called as Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. The territory has ethnically cleansed its indigenous Greek population. Furthermore, there are countries that became independent countries only on recent times, and enough time hasn't passed for these countries to show a track record of developed democratic institutions, but their scores are higher than India. If you take East Timor, it became officially a country only in 2002. Its score is 72 and is categorized as a free territory. Next is Montenegro, which became independent only in 2006, and its score is 67. Mongolia ended its one-party system in 1990 in favor of a free multi-party elections only in 1990. Its score is 84 and it is categorized as a free country. Now, I have nothing against these countries and hope they go on to become great democracies, but the comparison makes this report lose all of its credibility. This is the third part. This video will be on EIU Democracy Index. It will focus on their methodology, India's performance on this index across time, and comparison of India's rank with other countries. EIU Democracy Index. The Democracy Index is an index compiled by Economist Intelligence Unit, the research division of the Economist Group, a UK-based private company which publishes the weekly newspaper The Economist. Their first Democracy Index report was published in 2006.
The index provides a snapshot of the state of democracy worldwide in 165 independent states and 2 territories. The index is based on 5 categories which are as follows. Electoral process and pluralism. 12 questions are asked on this. The second one being functioning of government. 14 questions are asked on this. The third one is political participation. 9 questions are asked on this. Fourth one is political culture. 8 questions are asked on this. The fifth one is civil liberties. 17 questions are asked on this. The index has a total of 60 questions spread across the above mentioned 5 categories. You can check out the full list of questions on the paper through the link in the description. Now we'll see how the scoring is done. The scoring of these questions is based on a combination of dichotomous, that is 0-1 marks for some questions, and there is a 3-point scoring system, that is 0, 0.5 and 1 marks for some questions. Then using the scores for the questions, the individual category indices are calculated. The individual indices scores are sum of scores of the questions whose scores are converted to a scale of 0 to 10. Like after the conversion, the question scores are added to get individual index. Then the final score of democracy index is calculated by taking simple average of scores of the 5 individual indices. The index values are then used to categorize countries within one of the 4 types of regimes. The first one being full democracies. If their score is greater than 8, then they come under this. The second one is flawed democracies. If their score is greater than 6 and less than or equal to 8, then they come under this. Third one is hybrid regimes. If their score is greater than 4 and less than or equal to 6. The fourth one is authoritarian regimes. If their scores is less than or equal to 4, then they come under this category. This paper states that the questions asked by the EIU Democracy Index report to be highly subjective in nature, making objective scoring difficult. Hence the paper goes on to say it is difficult to make cross-country analysis on this. For example, we can take some of the questions that are listed here. Like, how pervasive is corruption? The question is highly subjective and can be answered by different experts very differently. And another question being popular perceptions of the extent to which citizens have free choice and control over their lives. This question is also highly subjective. You can see the rest of the question in this table. The table has been directly taken from the paper. Now, the answer to these questions are taken from 2 sources. The first one being expert opinions. Second one being public opinion polls for about 15 questions, only if they are available. Now let us go a bit deep into the expert part. The responses for about 45 questions are from experts. The report, however, does not reveal the number of experts or their nationality, credentials, or even their field of expertise. The second one is public opinion polls. Public opinion surveys, mainly the World Values Survey, conducted by the World Values Survey Association, based out of Stockholm, Sweden, are used for some questions, only if the survey is available. If the survey is not available, then the expert assessment is used for these questions also. In case of India, the WVS report available is of 2012 from the Wave 6. The latest round of Wave 7, that is from 2017 to 2020, has not been conducted for India yet. This is a screenshot that I took from the WVS website. Here you can see that they have mentioned further surveys interrupted by the outbreak of the coronavirus, whose delivery is delayed and expected after April 2022, including India, Uzbekistan, Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Since the latest public opinion poll has not been conducted for India after 2012, this implies that the entire score for India is based only on expert opinions. Now let us look into India's performance in this index. India has been kept in the category of flawed democracy since 2006. 2006 is when the EIU Democracy Index was first released. India's rank deteriorated sharply from 27 in 2014 to 53 in 2020. But if you see, the score and hence the rank went down to 46th position from 2020 to 2021. The reason the EIU report states that it is primarily on the account of repealing of the farm laws. In this graph, you can see that the rank from 2006 to 2021. This graph has been directly taken from the paper. You can see the improvement in rank from 2020 to 2021 as I had mentioned before. The scores declined primarily in these 3 categories: civil liberties, political culture and electoral process and pluralism. The decline was the maximum in the category of civil liberties, where it declined from 9.41 in 2013 to 5.59 in 2021. During the same period, the score on political culture declined from 6.25 to 5.0. During the same period, the electoral process and pluralism score went down from 9.58 to 8.67. As I had mentioned before, there was an improvement in the scores from 2020 to 2021. The scores improved on civil liberties, political participation, and functioning of government categories. Even this table has been directly taken from the paper. In this table, you can see the scores for all 5 categories, and in the last column, you can see the overall score. The scores from 2014 for the categories mentioned in the previous slides are marked in the red here. You can see the scores dip in electoral process and pluralism. It was 9.58 in 2014. It dipped to 8.67 in 2021. You can see the same thing happening in political culture. It was 6.25 in 2014 and it dipped to 5 in 2021. The same thing with civil liberties. 9.41 in 2014 to 6.18 in 2021. In the previous slide, we saw that the scores improved on civil liberties from 2020 to 2021, and you can see that here. It was 5.59 in 2020 and it improved to 6.18 in 2021. And the same thing happened in political participation. You can see that it was 6.67 in 2020 and it improved to 7.22 in 2021. And even in the functioning of government, it improved from 7.14 to 7.50 in 2021. The paper states that this increase in scores from 2020 to 2021 is primarily because of the repealing of the farm laws. Now let's compare India's rank with other countries. India's rank in the EIU Democracy Index is 46 in 2021. Cross-country comparison shows that India's rank is below various countries that are clearly either less democratic or are recently formed states. If you take the example of Malaysia, which is ranked 39, even though there is an ongoing political crisis in the country since 2019-2020. This paper mentions that the Constitution of Malaysia forbids discrimination against citizens based on sex, religion, race, but also accords a special position in Article 153 of the Constitution to Bumiputra, the indigenous people of Malaysia, including ethnic Malays, and members of tribes indigenous to the states of Sabah and Sarawak in eastern Malaysia. But on a personal level, and on the face of it, I think just because they provide some special status to their indigenous people, their democratic nature will not go down. On the 2 categories where India's score has gone down sharply, that is, the civil liberties and political culture categories. There are countries which are newly formed countries, even though they have clearly faced political issues in the recent past, but still have higher scores. India's score on political culture is 5.0 in 2021. If we compare the score with Lesotho, which is a country that has faced a military coup in 2014 and emergency was declared in 2020 and again in 2022, it has a score of 5.63. East Timor, which officially became a country only in 2002, has a score of 6.88. Sri Lanka and Hong Kong, which have faced political turmoil in the recent past, have scores of 6.25 and 7.50 respectively. India's score on civil liberties was 6.18. In comparison, Lesotho has a score of 6.47, East Timor has a score of 7.35, and Hong Kong has a score of 8.53. This paper points out that simply providing the same questions for all countries does not mean getting comparable scores, as the generic questions can be answered very differently by different experts, leading to arbitrary cross-country scores and hence rankings. This is the 4th and final part. This will be on EIU Index. It will focus on their methodology, India's performance on this index across time, and comparison of India's rank with other countries. EIU Index. EIU rankings are produced by the Varieties of Democracy Institute at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, and this is their logo. This index consists of 6 indices. They are the first one being Liberal Democracy Index. It captures both liberal and electoral aspects of democracy based on Electoral Democracy Index and Liberal Components Index. That is the second one and the third index in this list. Second one being Electoral Democracy Index. This index captures the extent to which regime holds clean and free elections, actual freedom of expression, alternative sources of information and association. Male and female suffrage is also captured, and the degree to which government policy is vested in elected political officials. The third one is Liberal Component Index. This index is created to capture the liberal principle of democracy, which is the importance of protecting individual and minority rights against both the tyranny of the state and the tyranny of the majority. This index covers three sub-indices, that is, equality before the law and individual liberties, judicial constraints on the executive. Executive means the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers like Defense Minister and Home Minister, and legislative, that is Parliament, constraint on the executive. The fourth one being Egalitarian Component Index. The egalitarian principle of democracy measures to what extent all social groups enjoy equal capabilities to participate in the political arena. The index covers aspects such as equal protection, access, and distribution of resources. The fifth index is Participatory Component Index. In participatory principle of democracy, emphasis is placed on active participation by citizens in all political processes, be it electoral and non-electoral. The index takes into account four important aspects of citizen participation, that is, civil society organizations, mechanisms of direct democracy, participation and representation through local and regional governments. Sixth and the final index is Deliberative Components Index. This index captures to what extent the deliberative principle of democracy is achieved. It mainly assesses the process by which decisions are reached in the polity. All of these indices have various subcomponents which are generated using various set of variables. The sub-indices and hence the democracy-based indices are created by combining two kinds of variables in broad sense, and there are overall approximately 473 variables in the VDEM dataset. The first one being factual variables. These, as the name indicates, factual in nature, and these are filled or pre-recorded by research assistants / project manager / country coordinator, etc. These include election type, minimum voting age, percentage of population with suffrage, head of state name, presidential election vote share of largest vote getter, etc. The second one being evaluative indicators based on rating provided by experts. These variables are based on responses for questions from experts. The data on these questions is gathered generally from 5 experts per country year observation. As per VDEM report, these experts are generally in academics or professionals working in media or public affairs, example senior analysts, editors, judges. The report says that about 2/3 experts are also nationals or residents in a country and have documented knowledge of both the country and specific substantive area. The details of who these experts are not made public. The VDEM report says that it is because of VDEM's policy on confidentiality. The issue is that the list of questions in the report clearly shows that they are highly subjective in nature, and it is very difficult for any expert to answer these questions objectively, which makes cross-country comparisons very tough. Some examples of the questions for experts can be seen here, like, is there freedom from torture? Or do men enjoy the right to private property? Or is political power distributed among various social groups, etc. There are questions which actually does not reflect democracy appropriately. One sub-index in VDEM Participatory Component Index is direct popular vote. The question being, to what extent is the direct popular vote utilized? Here, direct popular voting refers to an institutionalized process by which citizens of a region or country register their choice or opinion on specific issues through a ballot. Intention of this voting is to embrace initiatives, referendums, and plebiscites. Now, this is a question which is not meaningful to capture democracy, because it may be possible for smaller countries like Switzerland to conduct such voting, but not for a country with a size like India. India, and even US for that matter, gets a score of 0 on this variable, whereas Afghanistan gets 0.02, Belarus 0.064, and Cuba 0.151, which places them above India and US in this category. Now coming to India's performance in this index, The scores on most of these VDM indices have been declining for India since 2014, and India was downgraded to electoral autocracy in 2021. The scores have declined on 4 out of 6 indices. The score on Liberal Democracy Index reduced from 0.567 in 2013 to 0.357 in 2021. During the same period, score on Electoral Democracy Index declined from 0.695 to 0.444. During the same period, Deliberative Component Index went from 0.885 to 0.605. And during the same period, Liberal Component Index went from 0.806 to 0.744. The scores on other two indices, that is Egalitarian Component Index and Participatory Component Index, remained almost same during this time. This table shows the scores of 6 indices under VDM Index all the way from independence. You can also see the sharp drop since 2014 and even the dip during the emergency period. Now if you observe, today's score is similar to that of the emergency period. Now all we have to ask is whether today's condition in India is similar to that of emergency period, where there were obvious political repression, suspended elections and censored press, and the arbitrary nature of this index comes out because of this. An interesting observation this paper makes out from the VDM index is that India does well on objective parameters such as share of population with suffrage or share of direct popular vote, but shows sharp decline in categories which are based primarily on expert opinion. One such example is under freedom of expression and alternate information, where the score declined from 0.882 in 2013 to 0.598 in 2021. This is based on a question such as, is there self-censorship among journalists and reporting on issues that the government considers politically sensitive, and is there media bias against opposition parties or candidates, and of the major print and broadcast outlets, how many routinely criticize the government. Another interesting observation this paper makes out from the VDM index is that in VDM index, articles from media seem to have been cherry-picked and judgments have been made on that basis. For example, the VDM index report notes that there have been decline in autonomy of the election management body. It also mentioned that the overall freedom and fairness of election also was hit hard with the last elections held under PM Modi's regime in 2019, precipitating a downgrading to electoral autocracy. However, the report does not provide any solid basis for coming to this conclusion. Now we'll see how India's score compares with other countries. Keep in mind, India's rank in VDM Liberal Democracy Index is 93. Cross-country comparisons show that countries which are recently formed or have reported some clear political issues have better ranks than India. Take for example, the Kingdom of Lesotho has a rank of 60 in the report. This country started having democratically elected government first in the mid-1990s and has faced various disruptions after that. In 2014, there was a military coup that replaced the then Prime Minister. In 2020 and again in 2022, emergency was declared in this country. East Timor, which officially became a country only in 2002, is ranked at 64th position. Kosovo's rank is 79. It declared independence from Serbia in 2008 and only then gained recognition as a sovereign state by the UN. FYI, India doesn't recognize Kosovo as a nation. Nepal and Bhutan have higher rank than India even though they are very recent democracies. In conclusion, this paper says that even though these indices are highly subjective in nature, these cannot be ignored as they indirectly feed into concrete things like World Bank's WGI that in turn feeds into sovereign ratings. These indices will gain further importance because of a growing mandate for using ESG, that is environmental, social and governance indicators for investment and trade. Even though the questions used here are subjective and are worded in a way that is impossible to be answered objectively, even for country, let alone for cross-country comparison. There are questions that should be asked but are excluded in these indices, like, is the head of the state democratically elected? This question would sharply reduce scores for countries such as Sweden, Norway, UK, Denmark, Belgium and Netherlands because they are constitutional monarchies. This question is not only relevant to a measure of democracy but can also be answered very objectively. This paper gives out some suggestions to deal with this. Since these indices are inputs into world governance indicators, Government of India should request World Bank to demand greater transparency and accountability from these institutions. Meanwhile, independent think tanks in India should be encouraged to do similar perception-based indices for the world in order to break the monopoly of a few handful Western institutions. Hope this 4-part series will bring you a healthy deal of skepticism to any sort of index that comes out from the West, or from anywhere outside, or from within India for that matter. Thank you.